Want to raise this in more detail with Dr. Kevin Campbell, the K-Rock Consulting President, CEO, physician, cardiologist by training as well. Doctor, it's always great to have you. Do you worry that there's a core group of people, a quarter to a third of Americans, who have not and likely will not get this vaccine, any of the vaccines?
I think that's a real concern. And what we've seen since April, which, by the way, coincides when we put a pause for 10 days on the J&J vaccine, we've seen a reduction, significant reduction in vaccine uptake. And the biggest group are those 65 and under. They typically are only about 45% of them are vaccinated. And we also know that the highest risk group now for these more contagious variants tend to be that 12-year-old to 25-year-old group. So it's a real problem.
Meanwhile, doctor, we're learning that Canadians who are fully vaccinated are going to be allowed to return, take a COVID test, exit quarantine after negative result. This slow global reopening into countries that the U.S. will allow Americans to travel to, if those countries will allow them to travel there, continues. What do you make of it?
I think if you can have a situation where you do reach herd immunity and you do have the majority of your population vaccinated, I think that we should be open for travel and return back and forth, just as the Canadians are doing. I think here we have a real problem with vaccine hesitancy in that group of people. I do think things like what you've reported on just now with making it very convenient will address some of those. But I do think the other part of the puzzle is how do we reverse the bad press that J&J received after a 10-day pause, which I'm not sure I even agreed with that pause.
That's interesting. I never thought of connecting the two when the stall, in the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, when that was going on in April, and how that might have staggered out and hurt and impacted the number of people who finally did get vaccines. Certainly scared some off as well. If we never get beyond that percentage, in other words, it stays at roughly a quarter of the American people who are not vaccinated, in that subset of the population, doctor, are those people who will gather at large events and be allowed to go to large events, are they potentially going to be at super spreader events among those who are similarly not vaccinated?
I think that's very true. I think those that choose not to get vaccinated are putting themselves and their families at very high risk for COVID. We know that COVID kills. We know that there's certain groups of people that it is even more virulent in and results in hospitalization and death. The good news is those of us who are vaccinated are very, very, very unlikely to get a severe case, be hospitalized, and die from it. But this straggling group of people is going to continue to make COVID an issue for unfortunately years to come, I believe.
Doctor, I ask you a lot of idiotic questions, but just to allay my concerns, or whether we should be concerned in this country about this highly transmissible variant that started in India, that now accounts for 6 or 7%, I forget the exact number, doctor, of new U.S. cases. That appears to be a particularly virulent strain. Does it worry you?
Here's what worries me. The group of people, particularly those 12 years old to about 30, seem to be the ones that are getting this strain in very high numbers. You're right, it's about 6% so far here. But in the UK, where a little over 50% of folks are vaccinated, and again, that one age group is lagging, it's the dominant strain. 60% are having that strain. What the good news is we know from data that looked at the vaccines, Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine both appear to be protective. One thing to remember, get your second shot. When they studied the Delta variant, as it's called, with the Pfizer vaccine, the effectiveness was only about 33% with one shot. With two shots, it was almost 90%. So get two shots. You've got to get the second shot.
Thank you, doctor, very, very much. Great seeing you again. Dr. Kevin Campbell on all of that. Again, steady as she goes on these numbers, but there is an issue here with these. 1 out of 4 Americans who are just not keen on it, might never be. So we'll keep an eye on that. Also keeping an eye on